Thank you, guys. Well, I know everybody's excited to just come out and be at this event. So regardless of why you're here, somebody forced you to be here or something, super grateful that everybody's here and coming out of the house and actually being at this event. I'll tell you, this book has been so fun to write because it is not just my ideas about the book, it's the research that went into the book. Like if you saw some of the folks like Jeffrey Moore, who wrote Crossing the Chasm, called it like like when we're doing this documentary that we'll release in a few months, he's like, well, this is the next book after Crossing the Chasm, which felt like a huge testament to the research that has gone into the book. And then like David has also been part of the research that we have done and the interviews we have done, and it's across the board. So what I want to do today is share with you three things. Number one, I want you to recognize and self-assess what stage of the business you're in. That I've found is the number one challenge companies face. They just don't know what stage they're in. And if you don't know what stage you're in, it's going to be really hard to align your entire executive team or the rest of the team that you have in the organization. They're going to have a tough time doing it. And I'm going to do that using two different frameworks. So get ready. If you love frameworks, it's going to be a feast for you on that. The second part, I'm going to share with you why your go-to-market is broken and how do you decipher that. If you don't know your go-to-market is broken, it's going to be a humbling experience today. I'm going to share some of the words that might be happening in your team right now, that when you hear that, you will know, oh, that's a telltale sign that our go-to-market is broken. And when you recognize that the go-to-market process is broken, you can then take the step to fix it. But if you don't know what words to look for, today you're going to be exposed to those. And number three, I'm going to leave you guys with a question. I'm going to leave you with something to go to your team, with your executive team, and actually just talk about this. There's a ton of research in the book. There are scorecards and templates. I'll share the URL later. You can just download. You don't have to even go and type your email address. Just download when I share the URL with you, because the templates and scorecard will help you on that journey. So with that being said, let me share the question that is the crux of why we wrote the book. Here's the question. How many of you think that you're building a great company? Now, does every great company have the desired outcome? They don't. If you think about it, why is it that people who are building great companies don't have great outcome? Well, here's a study that McKinsey did. And this is really interesting. This is really the reason why this book exists. It talks about the fact that literally 0.04% of the companies get to over 10 million. Think about that. When you start a company, you feel like, well, I have dreams and aspirations to build a great company. You hit $1 million in revenue, you hit $5 million in revenue, you hit $10 million in revenue. And after that, you might think that I got this. I'm good, I'm golden. But guess what? As soon as you hit 10 million, you enter what SaaS is very well knownly calls valley of death. Right after 10 million, you actually enter into your transformation change in your business, where you actually, the success metric for you as a company to be successful and actually stay there and get to 50 million actually dramatically reduces. You can look at the chart. Between 10 and 50 million, the number of companies that are successful is just dramatically lower. And what's interesting, when McKinsey did this study, they looked at all the different reasons that there are, and they attributed it to one thing: go-to-market. The reason companies fail after having incredible vision, amazing team, is not because the vision all of a sudden become outdated. It's not because you lose the ability to hire great people. It's because just like your product needs to evolve, your go-to-market needs to evolve. And if your go-to-market doesn't evolve, then your companies will actually come down to a screeching halt. Larry Page actually said this, which I thought literally summarizes this. Like, good ideas with great execution is how magic happens. And this was talking about the magic number, so I thought it's more appropriate to use that. But if you think about it, the execution, what is execution? Everybody talks about it. It's all about execution. How many times you have heard anybody just saying, oh, it's now all about execution? You're like, what does that mean? What does that even mean? Does just go and start doing stuff? No, what they mean is having go-to-market. But the challenge that we found in all the interviews we did, we had Brian Halligan, who's the ex-CEO of HubSpot now, a public company CEO, all the way to Jeffrey Moore, Scott Dorsey, David, Kelly Ford, who had over 150 exits of successful companies. You're talking to all these VC CEOs, and they're all asking and saying different definitions of go-to-market. And that's where the research comes to life. So I want to kind of share a story. This is my son, Krish. And you can see he's wearing tennis shoes, Terminus socks, baseball t-shirt, football in his hand, basketball shorts. And this is when he was 8. And this is like a startup company, right? He's saying, I asked him, like, Krish, what game are we going to play? And he said, Papa, anything is possible. Right? I think that's how startups are. Startups are all about like, well, look, you know what? We're going to try different things. We're going to go and go after this market. We're going to test new things. And that makes sense to be in that stage. I call that a problem market fit stage. That's where you're actually figuring out, is the problem real? And are people going to pay for it? So is there a market for it? Problem market fit. You're in that stage. You're in the early stage of it where anything is possible. You're figuring things out. But as he grew, that's Krish again, wearing red and blue. Clearly, those are his favorite colors. With his coach, Jack. And he's now found a passion for tennis. I guess with COVID, because he couldn't play any other game, that was the game of choice. That's all he got to play. So he really started to play that. And really interestingly, he started to have success in it. Well, I call that finding your lane of genius, right? That's your product market fit. Now you know, as a company, it works for this particular segment of the market. It works with this particular type of customer. It works for this dollar amount that you want to sell. So that's your product market fit. And like any kid, when you start playing things and stuff, he wants to be legendary, right? He wants to be a legendary tennis player at one point. And I think that's true for all the businesses. Each one of your business, you want to be a legendary business. You want people to know who you are, what you mean, where you go, and people want to be known, and you want to build a successful business. Well, that's what's true. But how do you get there? What I call is a platform market fit. So to show this all together, this is your growth trajectory and transformation. If those are the two axes, your problem, product, and platform are just like this. What's interesting about it, it's not a straight line. It's a squiggly line. I call this the squiggly line. Companies actually fail not as a problem market fit or a product market fit or a platform market fit. Our research shows over and over companies actually fail in between these stages when they're about to transform from being a problem to product. And the reason some company could still be in problem market fit, guess how much revenue, just shout out a number, when do you think you are in a problem market fit? Like what revenue number would be like, well, after this, I'm no longer in problem market fit. I'll be in a product market fit. What revenue number would that be? 2 million? Our research shows it's 20 million. You could be a $20 million business and still be in problem market fit. Any guesses why? It's because you're growing your top line revenue, but your retention, you have a leaky bucket. So you would never have a predictable going. You figure that part out, your acquisition engine, but you have a leaky bucket. And in a little bit, I'm going to go through examples of companies who are going through that and seeing how they actually move. So it was eye-opening to us. I thought problem market would be just early stage, like, just trying to come up with an idea. But no, you could be a $20 million business and still be a problem market fit company. And then as you get to product market fit, what stops companies from moving from product to platform in a lot of cases is that they cannot evolve their go-to-market. It changes. We're going to go through another framework that shows what are the pieces between product and platform. But what happens as soon as you hit product market fit is this. As soon as you hit product market fit, all of a sudden your customers are going to say, hey, can you do more than what you actually sold us? You're going to have competitors who are going to come to you and say, can you sell us more product? And they're going to say that, hey, there's a cheaper product out there in the marketplace. You're going to have pricing. You're going to have feature, all these things, which is going to force you as a company to become a platform company, meaning you have to have more than one product to sell. You have more than one service to sell, and your customers demand it. It's not something that you just choose to do. but your customers demand it. Now, here's the thing that I found, and I wonder how many of this resonates with you guys. You can't leapfrog this. You can't go from problem market fit to platform market fit. Now, how many of you actually on your website or you see right as soon as you start a company, you said, we are a platform? And I understand the urge for it. I'm a co-founder of a company called Terminus here in town, and I remember doing that and going through that process. It is so easy to fall into the trap of building a platform, but guess what? It almost took us 5 years. We feel like we are today, 7 years into, we're about to be a $50 million company. We have 6 different acquisitions in the last, 5 different acquisitions in the last 6 years, and we still feel like we're right in the middle of product and platform. We're still figuring out how do we sell all these different product suites to a customer because customers are buying different products. So when you think about transitioning and transforming your business, you have to pay real close attention to it. So number one question for you guys right now, how many of you think you're in problem market fit? Right? How many of you guys think you're in product market fit? How many of you think you're in platform market fit? All right, so like a lot of you are in problem and product, which is standard. This is where we are. And let me also say and empathize with the point that it's okay to be in that stage. It's totally okay to be in that stage. You could be a 20 million, 5-year down company and still be in that stage. This is not something you do overnight. This could take years, if not a decade, in order to transform from one stage to another. So here are some examples for you guys to just think about this problem market fit, product market fit, and platform market fit. Think about HubSpot. How many of you are familiar with HubSpot? Most everybody, right? You think about they started with SMB and marketers, that early stage. And David, you probably know more than anybody around there in their market at that point. And at some point, when Marketo, Eloqua, Pardot, everybody came in space, they figured out, oh, marketing automation is really the place where they need to go in and actually start making money because they had all this brand and how many people, but they have the greatest, and it's written all over the place, where they had a tremendous amount of retention issue. They have a big leaky bucket. They have written about this publicly, but as soon as marketing automation started to solidify, they just latched onto it. And that became the thing that they started to focus on, product market fit. And now they have the whole wheelhouse, right? Like they have the whole flywheel going on their side, marketing, sales. So they earned the right to do more things. Salesforce, same thing, no different. About 10 years, they stayed in the CRM lane. Until they acquired ExactTarget, they did not jump into Marketing Cloud. They stayed in that for 10 years. So it's a big shift when you go from problem to product. It's not an overnight shift. It's a longer shift. It's an executive shift that you have to think about. But this is not just for B2B. You think about McDonald's. This was fun to do research. Did you know that in 1940, when McDonald's started, they actually sold barbecue to orange juice? How many of you go to McDonald's, if you do, get barbecue and orange juice? Like you don't, right? Like it's crazy. In 1948, they did a research of what do people buy, and they found out that people only buy 3 things. And I think we all can guess what those 3 things are. And I'm guilty of buying that over and over again every time I go. And what's interesting is like when they figured out that everybody just buys like soda and a burger, they essentially shut down their operation. Literally shut down for 3 months. And they restarted it with a menu of 3 options and a couple of other things, but just 3 options. And everything soared. Again, note, product market fit. Getting to product market fit is that important. Even further, like how many of you are familiar with Morning Brew or Skim? Right? Like it's crazy. They started with literally saying, we're going to go after millennials who don't like to read Wall Street Journal, but they want news. And they want to have news. Within just 3 years, they had 6 million people signing up for their daily news. Again, note, 1 product, 3 million in revenue. That's what they focused on. And then they earned the right to become a platform market fit. Now they have a retail newsletter, a marketing newsletter, a tech newsletter, all of that. Like even Joe Rogan, like how many of you listen to Joe Rogan, right? Like he started with answering questions on Twitter. And then he focused on that 1 channel. Again, note the product, 1 product. Nailed it before you actually become. David, what was the thing that in our research you said, but nail it, you had a 3-word thing when you talked about companies who go through it.
Nail it, scale it, and then prep it.
Yeah, was it milk it or was it?
Milk it.
Was it that? Okay, so nail it, scale it, and then milk it. It was, you have to nail the product, then you scale it, and then you actually have the right to build a bigger product. So when I did the research, I'm like, well, this is universal. You can apply this to your business. You can even apply that to your personal brand. You can just apply it to a B2C company. So regardless of what stage of the business you're in, this concept is completely transferable. Now, here's what's interesting about it. I would love to hear from you. Just raise your hand, how many of you think that your go-to-market today, before we even go into the definition, who owns it, who owns the mess, and how do you fix it, before we even get to that, how many of you think you have a sales-led go-to-market strategy as a company? 1, 2, 3, all right. Product-led, all right. 2, service-led. I got it. Category-led. That's a new one. I can explain that in a second. Community-led. There you go. Oh, you're in community-led as well as?
I thought the word product would apply to me, but really it's a community.
It's a community-led. All right, so here's the thing. In the research, we found that these are basically the 5 types of the go-to-market that you can have. There's nothing wrong with any one of them. But unless you know, as a company, as a team, what is your go-to-market strategy, it's extremely hard to figure out how you're going to fix it, what the problems are, what questions to ask. It's just impossible. So you have to figure that part out. Now, here's something that I will offer. You cannot have more than one type of go-to-market strategy. You just can't. If you do, you're doomed to fail. It's just the research has shown over and over again, when you want to let's be like that company and this company and that company, well, you'll be no one. You have to choose. You have to be clear, and you have to be consistent, and you have to repeat that, and you have to understand, and you have to explain that to your organization over and over and over again. So it's really important that you understand the definitions of what it means. And again, in the book, and later on we can talk more in detail, but it's important to understand what type of go-to-market strategy you have. So let me ask you, how do you know your go-to-market is broken? Shout out, let me know what you think. How do you know that your go-to-market is broken? I see somebody checking notes in the book. Go ahead, Todd.
Inconsistent results.
Inconsistent results, right? That's awesome. Anybody else? Go ahead, Sean.
Come back to me.
All right. Baha?
You're not able to scale. Your sales is not scaling up.
Sales is not scaling up. All right. Ortez?
I'd say it's not repeatable.
It's not repeatable. Here's what we found. And this might be humbling. So you don't have to say, hey, that's what's happening in my company. It's totally okay. Keep it internal to yourself if you want. But we found this over and over true. This is the conversation that might be happening today in your office, in your meeting. And my encouragement to you will be when that happens, stop that conversation. Go detail. Don't overlook that. We have done that in our journey as Terminus over and over again, where we did not, knowing that there is a problem, we did not actually pause the conversation to dive deeper into it to fix it. And so all it does is it just makes it a bigger mess. But here are some of the reasons. You might have somebody in the sales team somehow miraculously saves the day and closes 2 big deals and you hit your numbers. Right? You actually might have our customer buys enthusiastically because our marketing is so good, but they don't renew it. They can see the ROI. Our sales and marketing is still wondering what our true ICP is. Marketing and sales have completely different goals. They're celebrated for completely different numbers. Your sales numbers are down and marketing is going and having margaritas. Never happened before, right? If those things are happening in your organizations, your go-to-market is broken. So now the question is, who owns go-to-market? This questions haunted us for about a year and a half of the research of the book. Who owns go-to-market? But before you answer, I'm going to ask you this question in a second and love to hear your response. I'll give you options too, but let me define go-to-market for you because most times we haven't just seen it. Like, what does it mean? So I'll give you a bigger definition, a fuller definition, and then we'll come back to it. But let's see who owns go-to-market, right? So here's the definition of go-to-market. It is a transformational process. It's not a strategy. It's not something you do over the weekend with executive team. That's vision casting. Go-to-market is literally a process that you're constantly, and I'll show you what one of the CEOs says that became a quote on the book. The second part is that it is ultimately a path to revenue. So that's what go-to-market is supposed to do, is help you get to the revenue number quicker, faster, in a way that makes sense for your business. What's also interesting is that you have to redefine your revenue team. It's no longer your sales team, which is typically what happens in the early stage of the business. It is your sales, it is your marketing team, it is your customer success team, all coming together as your revenue team. What's interesting about that is that ultimately, when you think about the product, that becomes the part of the experience that you're giving them. Now, that's the fuller definition of go-to-market. So let me ask you and give you some options here. Who owns go-to-market in your company? CEO? CEO? With that definition, was it different? The answer was different in your mind before I gave you the definition?
I think for me, I've kind of always viewed it as being my job because if I don't understand, it'll be hard for me to get other people on board. So.
CEO. Who else? Kenny?
Still a combination right now.
Still a combination?
I don't think it's great.
Yeah, if everybody owns it, nobody owns it. Anything else? You've seen so many, Aaron.
I said CEO.
CEO as well. All right. The first group that actually has got the answer right. You must be checking the book. I've done so many of this with so many VCs, and everybody, VC and their portfolio of companies, and they would say the CRO. In some cases, even the CMO. And here's what's interesting about it. When I was talking to Brian Halligan about this, and he said, again, he's a CEO of a public company, right? And he's like, I own it. I'm like, Brian, I get it if you're saying it from a perspective like the buck stops at the CEO. I get it from that perspective. He's like, no, you don't understand. I own it. I'm like, how can you own it? You must have people who owns it. He's like, no, look, there are only three things that matters to me. One is the vision for the company. I have to constantly iterate on it as a CEO. I have to constantly tell to the VCs, to the customers, to the employees, to the people outside. I have to constantly talk about the vision for the company. Number two is culture. If we can hire great people, we got nothing to do. We're going to go crumbling down, which is why the culture of HubSpot is what it is. And number three, and the most unsexy part of the business, is go-to-market. If I don't own go-to-market, nobody will. Like, who else is thinking about who should we partner up with, at the same time trade-off between should we acquire a company? Who else is thinking about should I put money more in hiring more salespeople, or should I have an agency program and actually create a revenue model over there? There are all data points throughout the business, but there's nobody singular other than the CEO of the company doing it. And that was incredible, because that was, as soon as I talked to the direct reports of a lot of the companies, that wasn't their understanding. So I would encourage each one of you, as leaders of your group, is to go back to your team and make sure it's very clear who owns it and how you expect everybody to execute on it. Because if they don't know you own it, it's going to be a problem for you. There's going to be a challenge that will come through. All right. So with that being so this is the first part where I introduced you to the 3 Ps, figure out what stage of the business you're in. I wanted you to see how you know your go-to-market is broken and who owns it. Now I'm going to share with you real quickly 3 things that you could do. There are about 6 different things in the book, but 3 things that you can do to fix it. Now, I'm going to go through this fast in the interest of time. The first one, this became a quote in the book, on the back of the book, which is go-to-market is like building a new product. And this, again, came from Brian as that part of that early conversation. He's like, look, I am changing it every week, not every month, not every year. I'm changing go-to-market every week. It's a big company. And I equate that to my daughter, who's asking countless questions every day. And she's like, where are we going? Where are we going? And he's like, that's my number one question all the time to my entire team. Like, hey guys, do we know where we're going? Do we know where we're going? So you have to think about go-to-market is a way of how you ask questions with your team. How do you align your team together? Here's another question for all of you. Who runs operations in your team? Is it the finance team right now? I know most of you are in problem product fit, market fit. Is it Rev-Ops? Have you thought about that? Or is it marketing ops? Marketing ops right now? Anybody else? Marketing ops too? Anybody running revenue ops? Revenue ops already? All right. How about the finance guys? Any love for them? You don't want finance to touch the numbers? All right. Well, what's interesting about it is that in most organizations, revenue ops doesn't even get to be at the same table because they haven't matured enough to recognize what revenue ops even means. So I'll tell you what happened at Terminus 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago, we hired Mallory Lee to run Rev-Ops. And she came in, and every executive meeting that we have on a Tuesday morning, she actually opens the meeting with, here is an executive dashboard of where our product is, where our acquisition numbers are, where our sales numbers are, where our marketing numbers are, what does the product usage looks like, what does the retention look like, what is our gross, what are our multiple products like churn, everything. And she reports directly into the CFO of the company. And I'll tell you that there's been nothing more transformational in our company has happened other than, there's many different things that changes the company, but that meeting has become more productive than it has ever been. Now here's why. When you have a Rev-Ops person run a company, run a meeting that is reporting outside of the CMO or the CRO, is independent, you no longer have conversations, what I believe happens in most organizations, who moved my cheese. You just don't have that conversation. You don't have like, did you update the spreadsheet that I gave you last night? Or no, that number is not correct. I think the updated, you don't have these sales marketing CS issues.
Give us your definition of what Rev-Ops consists of in your head.
Yeah, totally. Rev-Ops is typically having marketing ops, sales ops, product ops, CS ops, all reporting into this person. They may still be in different functions in many organizations, or in more mature organizations, they actually will be part of that team. So Rev-Ops is someone who actually is literally looking at numbers from all the business functions out there. As a matter of fact, what we did was, in the book, we created different scorecards, and that's where you can go to movebook.com and download it literally. Because what we realized that people are starting to track metrics that doesn't even make sense for the stage of the business they're in. So if you're in a problem market fit and you haven't really figured that out, it doesn't make sense for you to track a metric like NRR or GRR because you're just not even there. So what we created are, depending on the stage of the business you're in, we created a different scorecard. So this is a scorecard for a problem market fit, and this is for product market fit, where you start expanding and looking at more metrics around it. And this is the scorecard. Again, it's on the movebook.com. You can just download there. That's the scorecard for platform market fit. And she continues to expand that it has product usage and everything under the sun. And that allows everybody to have the conversation of, if you're a marketing leader, then you come into that meeting to answer, how can you help? You come in as a business leader with a marketing specialization to help. If you're a sales leader coming into that meeting, then you come as a business leader specialized in sales. If you're a product leader, you actually come as a business leader specialized in product and trying to figure out how you're going to help. It has changed the reason why we have that meeting. It has gone from, I think we need more help, there's an issue here, versus like, hey, I can help there. I think I know what I can do there, or I can have more resources there. It has been a fundamental change and a big movement around it. So, you shared the book. I just wanted to share a couple of early reviews I got for the book. And I'll let you read it. And I couldn't put the names of the people for obvious reasons, especially with the second quote, but that was really interesting to me, is recognizing that, oh my God, we got a problem. So I encourage everybody to look at these templates and have this conversation in your organization as leaders, because you are the one who are going to change. This is a transformation that you have to have in your organization. All right, here's one more question. What's missing in this org chart? CRO? Well, let's say they are CSO. CRO. And let's say HR kind of is reporting into typically the CFO or in that. But what's missing? Say again? Somebody said? Legal? Let's say the general counsel and all that stuff is under the CFO realm of it. What's missing in this? Well, how many of you would say you're, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, from my perspective, I mean, I always believe in having someone close to the customer reporting directly to me.
You're right. How many of you think you are a customer-obsessed company? Or that's part of your core values? And every time I ask and see it, I personally feel like I'm asking a very, very pointed question to you and almost questioning, are you doing your job? Because if you're a leader and if you don't have your top 10 customers' cell phone numbers in your pocket and you're not have a personal relationship with you, and if you haven't talked to a customer at least every other day or every week, then I would challenge you that I don't think you are a customer-obsessed company or a leader. I remember this story from Scott Dorsey where he said that when Scott McCorkle, right, like the head of product came in, as joined the company, at that time, he promised Scott Dorsey, who's the CEO of ExactTarget, one thing, and he stayed true to that. And Scott Dorsey still tells that story, and he shared that in the documentary. He said, he was head of product, Scott McCorkle. He was head of product, and he said, here's one thing I promise to you. There won't be a single day where I don't talk to a customer. And 5 years as he was in that role as the chief product officer, he talked to a customer every single day. And I feel like that is a big change of how you think about your customers. You can think about your customers all the way. David and I were just talking about the conversation we were having with Horst Schulze, who was the co-founder of Ritz-Carlton. And I was at an event where he was talking about the fact that he was a co-founder of Ritz-Carlton, like the best company when it comes to excellence of customer success and customer service. He said, not even once, with his 1,000 plus whatever number of hotels that he has, not even once he has missed doing onboarding for his employees. Not even once. As a matter of fact, he said, if somebody's starting on the 15th of the month, I will ask them, we will pay them for 15 days, but would not ask them to come in the hotel, no matter what job it is, from bellman to somebody washing dishes or sheets or the head of or the chef, doesn't matter. He's like, until I personally do the onboarding for them, I would not let them start and enter the building. That's obsession. So I'll challenge you, are you really customer obsessed? Or is somebody on your team, third down, actually talking to the customer? And I think that changes your go-to-market tremendously. All right, so here's the third truth around this, that retention becomes the new acquisition. I shared with this as an example around it, and I'm not going to go through data, but we ran like a ton of analysis around the companies that have the same acquisition rate, the same size, the same package that they're selling, at the same rate they're growing. And what we found that if the retention is higher, they actually have 5 times more ARR. So I'll challenge all of you that who are looking at your acquisition number, start looking at your retention number. It will really help build a stronger business. If retention is not part of your main metric, then you're not building a much stronger business out there today. So with that, let me give you the last framework, the second framework in the book, which has literally became the name of the book, Move. And we started with about 50 questions when we asked people about what is go-to-market, who owns go-to-market, how many people are in go-to-market, what's the org structure looks like for it, all these questions. And we came down to 4 questions. These are the 4 questions we came down to, every one of the companies, every CEO is asking and thinking about. They ask about, and it doesn't change. And here's the beauty of it. It doesn't change no matter what stage of the business you're in. The questions remain the same, but answers change. Let me just plot this on the 3 Ps that we went through, right? Imagine this. So go-to-market, Typically, early stage problem market fit, it starts with leads, typically founder-led, CEO-led. Then it becomes account-centric, where sales and marketing start becoming one team. That's where maybe ABM and all that thing becomes more important for you. And then as you get to platform market fit, this is where customer success comes in place. Now note that I put customer success ahead of sales and marketing. This was literally the direct result of the conversation with Jeffrey Moore, where he said, I literally spent a week with Mark Benioff and his entire team, and so like Monday 9 a.m. when we were actually having this call, and we were going through this research, because Brian and I were like excited about it, and he's like, you got this wrong. Well, what do you mean? Like, we have done all this research, we have all these surveys, we have all these CEO conversations. He's like, the order of these words are wrong. He said, you cannot be a platform market company unless your customers' success team is part of your go-to-market, and more importantly, comes ahead of your sales and marketing. It's just not possible for you to become that. Because you're going to talk about something called as customer cohorts. You're not even looking at the entire customer base as you think about success of your organization. You're going to look at certain segments of your customers. So let's apply the MOVE framework to it, like market, operations, velocity, and expansion to it. So if you're running in as a problem market fit company today, you probably have going after TAM, any and everybody out there trying to figure things out. Again, nothing wrong with it. You probably have ad hoc operations, your velocity of the deals and everything is just kind of, you're figuring things out, and that's okay. And your sales motions right now may be singular, right? It might be just focused on one way of getting, you have a salesperson or SDR and AE. And that's okay. That's what a problem market company in the early stage typically is formed of. As you move into a product market fit, you actually have figured out a segment that works for you. You know where to go. You know you can sell to that. You know that's the market that is. You know you can charge X amount of dollars. Now you think about segments. I can go and get into manufacturing at this price in this location. You get it. You start having more aligned sales and marketing, one team. Your metrics actually become one. Marketing and sales have the same number. They celebrate the same success. Everything starts to become proactive, and maybe at this time you figure out maybe it's not just our sales, maybe you start an OEM model, maybe you have an agency, maybe you have a partner model. You start figuring out, how do I bring more revenue other than my singular salesperson? But as you get to platform market fit, this is the part where you start thinking about cohorts. Of the 1,000 customers that I have, who are the 200 customers that I want more of? Who are the 200 customers that gives us the most value? And actually figuring out how do I treat them with, like, one of the things we talk about is that some customers deserve champagne and some sparkling water. As crazy as that sounds, that's just true. You can't treat everybody the same. $1 million customer is going to be different, and you have to treat them differently than a $100,000 customer. You have to start segmenting your customer success team and how you treat your customers at every stage of the business separately, especially in platform market fit. This is the part where your revenue operations really comes to life. So if you have it early on, man, that's incredibly awesome. That's not typically what companies do. And at this point, you've figured out the full expansion strategy around it. So let me use an example for it. Let's just talk about HubSpot again, right? HubSpot is a company and apply this MOVE framework to their 3 Ps where they started to just bring this to life for you. And we have done like 50 plus companies, just studies and studies on this one. But let's look at HubSpot. You all know their inbound model. That's how they started. I'm pretty sure everybody have done the website grader at some point. That's how they captured email addresses, and a freemium model. They started with that. And again, they were building a new category around inbound, and they have a high churn. All publicly available information. None of this is something that Brian or Terminus shared with me privately. This is publicly available information. And then you go and look at like what happened in product market fit. As we talked about, they figured out MA was the place to really nail in. They acquired Performable. That was the company where they literally understood, how do I fix and focus on middle of the funnel? That's where really they started to have real customer. But here's the interesting part. They expanded with an agency model. That's where they figured out the best way to sell to this market is through agency. And as they moved into their whole customer, their platform market fit, they recognized that 40% of the revenue comes from agencies. 60% of their early customers still comes from a freemium model. And they're selling now $1 million deal with 100,000 plus customers because now they are able to have more market. One thing I don't want you all to forget about this is that in the early stage, problem market and product market, your market size is the same. But in platform market, your market actually expands. Because you can now sell more products to more people in more different. So for example, in HubSpot case, they can now go to marketing persona and sales persona and customer success persona, which wasn't the case for almost 10 years of their existence. So your market expands too. So as we think about all the books that I've written, it's really interesting that now I've put it all together. I feel like I've written it for each stage of the business. The first book I wrote was for early stage companies for like, well, how do you think about leads and accounts? And then I wrote ABM is B2B, which was literally pulling it together and saying, you know what, this is it. ABM is B2B. That's how B2B marketing and sales should happen. But I did not think about customer success. And I did not think about Rev-Ops. I did not think about how companies become customer obsessed truly in that sense. And that's what this Move book is all about. So as I finish up, I want to encourage all of you to figure out what your next move is really going to be. And that is the question I think every leader is asking, like, what should I do? Now, the answer, again, is different depending on the stage of the business you're in. But the questions are the same. So you no longer have to worry about what question I want to ask. You still ask the same 4 questions. But you can change the answers and figure out what stage of the business you're in. And if you're a problem market fit, I'll say you should just focus on making sure your go-to-market is really, really agile. It's changing every week, and everybody needs to be okay with that. And you make that clear in your organization. If you're in a product market fit, I will say get ahead of the curve and get Rev-Ops implemented in your organization. It will change the way you think about transforming your business. And if you're in a platform market fit, as you start moving into that area, think about it that retention becomes the most important thing from your cohorts that you have of your customers. So hope this book helps you figure out the next move that you're going to have. And again, I love the name of the book just because I can put it on my shoe. So with that, thank you so much. Appreciate it. If there are any questions, I can take now, or we can even do it later on. So it's up to you.
Yeah, let's do a couple. I've got a mic here, so that way you can pick it up. Does anyone have questions here? I'll run it to you so it can be picked up. Anyway, up the front. Okay, great.
So in terms of like sales-led, product-led, community-led, the 5 different categories that you had mentioned, maybe it's just because of what I do in our business, but I'm talking to a lot of people who say things like, we're trying to become more fill in the blank. We're trying to become more sales-led. I hear a lot, we're trying to become more product-led. Can you speak to how difficult it is to pivot and transition from one strategy and go-to-market to another?
Yeah, and David, I might lean on you as well for that question. Like, do companies actually, like, let's just take examples like Calendly and Terminus, two examples, since most of you guys know both of those companies. Calendly, what is their go-to-market?
Very much product-led. Like the furthest on that spectrum, yeah.
Right, and Terminus, it's very much sales-led in the early stage, and I would even say category-led because we kind of try to build the category around ABM. It is almost impossible for us to think about it being product-led. Because product-led thinks about the freemium model. Your motions are very different from it. You're trying to get as many people on it, and then you're trying to build in your product flows to get them to become multi-user, so the pricing model, everything kind of flows differently. Now, for Calendly to become full-on sales-led, it's not going to happen for majority of the people. They will go, oh, I see Microsoft, there are 50 people at Microsoft using Calendly. Let me now talk to their head of IT or head of product and actually sell an enterprise deal over there and make it a bigger deal. But for the most part, they're just looking at the list of customers they're getting. Like Tope sleeps every night and wakes up with 10,000 more customers, right? Like that's just a different model of going it. So it's extremely hard, in my opinion, and David, I love your thought, to transform your business from being a product-led, a sales-led to a product-led, unless your sales, the motions, actually the way you think about your product is completely different.
A bunch more sales reps and a bunch more enterprise motions. So if the core product's freemium, you can also have a sales-led motion.
Yeah, it's for bigger deals.
For bigger deals.
For bigger deals, just like what Calendly is doing right now. But if you confuse, you lose. I mean, that is the whole portion of this thing. Is like if that is such an important question, and I will again Companies struggle with it, but I would say raise that question as part of your executive team and let everybody lean into it, have a debate on it, but then and agree to, like Jeff Bezos says, like, disagree if there's disagreements, but commit to a process and a flow that you all can get behind. Yep.
Can you give an example of a community-led?
I would say, Terminus is an example of that, right? If you think about in the way we started off, we started with Flip My Funnel. That was, we built an entire community around the problem, not the product. So even today, when we do a Flip My Funnel event, our competitors are invited to come speak at that event because we're building an industry conference, not a customer conference. And that led for people to recognize that, oh, this is a real problem. That actually gets media involved in it. That brings analysts to it. So now all of a sudden, everybody's talking about it. So that's an example of community-led. You think about HubSpot, you think about inbound, right? Like that was one of the biggest reasons. I remember this conversation with both Brian and Dharmesh in the early days when they invested in Terminus. And I asked them, like, now that you're a successful company, why do you still invest in inbound? And why you haven't trademarked inbound at this point? And their response was like, look, we recognize that inbound is like 20,000 plus raving fans right now. At that time, this was like 4 years ago when we had that conversation, probably a lot more now. And he said, and we know there are competitors right across who are building better products than us. And we understand that, like as the company grows, we have more things to do. But for a singular problem, some companies right now down the street is trying to build a better product. But they will have to crawl up a 20,000 feet tall wall of raving fans before they go and attack our product and our pricing. So they look at that as their biggest moat around the business. So as you build a business, you can think as a community around that becomes your moat. You can make a product like Calendly did. Because like Calendly is like so easy to use, so that becomes the moat. So you have to figure out what is the moat. You think about Gainsight, another category leading company, they created Pulse. You think about Salesforce, they created Dreamforce. Not, again, creating a different name because they wanted to bring an entire community around, an ecosystem around them. And they looked at that as the first way to go to market. So I believe that one way to go to market could be community-led. One way to go to market could be product-led. Like Calendly did not build a community first, they built it. They actually built a product first and got it so easy for people to use and plug in that it became a viral phenomenon. So different ways to go about it, but you have to choose and you have to stay true to it. And it's a long term because you could still be, again, a $20 million company and in problem market fit. You could be a decade long working on it and still working and figuring out how do we get to the next stage.
Thank you.
Yep, Ortiz. Yep.
So you know how Bessemer has their kind of good, better, best, right?
Yes.
For moving from stage to stage. Do you have any benchmarks in terms of what that net retention rate should be in terms of, moving from stage to stage as you progress?
Well, that's a big question. Again, as a problem market fit in early stage, I think if you have, let's say, 50 customers or so, you already know what that is. What I'm finding out is that if it is less than 100, your valuation would go tremendously different. So as an example, I remember being in a conversation with a CEO and a bunch of VCs that had put money in it. The company was about 30 million in revenue. And the valuation was about, the company was about 50 million in revenue. And the valuation for that company that was getting pitched to them as they were raising another round was about 300 million. And the CEO was so frustrated. He's like, there are companies right now at 30 million in revenue and have $1 billion valuation. How is it that I'm a $50 million company and I don't have a $1 billion valuation? Fair question. The response from the VCs was this. If you were a $30 million company and I had a 100% net retention rate, your valuation will not only be $1 billion, it will be $2 billion because we believe that this problem that you're solving is much bigger. But because you have this $20 million customers now that are not the same use case, you have to do unnatural things to service these accounts. These are not repeatable use cases. They're actually bringing your entire business down. Because you have that baggage now, your valuation actually is low. So when I say retention is the new acquisition, we as a company literally just made that our mantra internally. It's like, we need to do it because that wasn't the case for us in the early days either. And we recognized the hard way, oh my God, it is so hard to fire a customer. Like, it's so hard to think about, like, how do you do that? It's extremely hard. The bigger the company and the more customers you have, it's extremely hard to do that. But guess what? That could actually bring your valuation down, and I had no idea about it. Zero. So if you are in a place where you're actually starting to acquire new customers, I would, again, encourage you guys to think about, as in the early stage, it is totally okay to have customers of all different things, but as quickly as possible, as you figure out what your true segment that you're going to go after, I would say, shut off all the other customers. Just don't go after these one-offs over and over again, because that's what will bring your business down. And I was shocked in that. It was such an eye-opening. The CEO was so frustrated, but he understood at the end of the day why the valuation was so low. Cool.
We've got a few more minutes if you're good. Okay.
Yep.
Hey, Sangram.
Yeah.
So what's your thought on the evolution of a role that basically either facilitates or owns go-to-market moving forward? Because as we see, yeah, we're getting data now from Rev-Ops, but the CEO as the owner a lot of times seems like that gets a little convoluted, too much time. Even you said it yourself, the actual go-to-market has to evolve daily. So what's your thoughts of somebody, a role kind of coming out of nowhere as with ABM? Now we have more ABM people owning ABM and whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely see, like, the CEO still owns it. I think this is what's the interesting thing. On the book, I have two quotes. One is from Jeffrey Moore, who's talking about, like, hey, this book is great and all that. And then I have another quote from Christopher Lochhead, who wrote Play Bigger around category leadership, saying, and you heard him in the video saying, hey, man, I love you, but I hate this book. And I put those both quotes on purpose on the front of the book. Because one, I wanted to recognize that this is not for everybody. Now, category creation is a choice. Go-to-market is not a choice. There are a lot of companies who would say, I want to be a category leader, and they might become a category leader, but there are only a few handful we can count on, like, fingers. But go-to-market is not a choice. There's not a single company that has become a leader, not designed a category, but became a leader in a category without actually having a solid, excellent go-to-market. Just not possible. So when I think about that, was a new role, the CEO still in both cases, category design, you cannot design a category if the CEO founder doesn't own it. It doesn't work. You'll see all these companies I just talked about, their founders and CEOs are still intact, involved, and building it. It hasn't become a marketing project. It hasn't become a sales project. Because what happens with that project? It changes as the season changes, as the quarter changes. It has to be a CEO level initiative. So as that it is there a new role that's emerging? Like right now, there's director of ABMs. Would there be a director of GTM? Well, there are actually in companies right now, like HubSpot has a head of go-to-market. But their still process is to become and be close to the CEO, reporting directly to the CEO, just like Rev-Ops. So do I see in the next 5 years or so more roles as go-to-market leaders who looks at sales, marketing, and customer success across? 100%. The CEO needs that. And especially if you come from Rev-Ops, I think I've said this several times out there now, that I think Rev-Ops is the second most important role in the company outside of CEO. Rev-Ops is the second most important role because the worst question in every company has been ever asked by a CEO is this to a marketing leader: hey, if I give you $1, what would you do? The marketing leader says, I'm going to get more leads, or I'm going to hire a content person. Then you go and ask the same question to a sales leader. What are you going to do with $1 more I give you, or $100,000 in sales? Well, I'm going to hire a salesperson. You're asking a great question to the wrong audience. Now you go and ask that question to a Rev-Ops leader. Hey, Rev-Ops leader, if I give you another $1, what would you do? Now the Rev-Ops leader has the understanding of the entire business and could say, you know what? I see that our problem is in sales enablement. We would rather hire a sales enabler that will drive our business forward, that will enable the sales the right way. We don't do that. That's where I would put money in. Now you're asking the right question to the right person in the company, which is why Rev-Ops becomes such a big thing. So I think there's a Rev-Ops growth as well as a go-to-market, chief go-to-market role, but still owned by the CEO.
Any more? We've got them for a few more minutes. If so, okay, great. We'll do one more and then
We'll wrap up.
Yep, perfect.
This is a little different, but in a way, kind of applies. Well, we're talking about companies that are kind of
moving along to potentially growth stage, how do you make sure that as an early stage organization, I mentor a bunch of smaller startups, and a lot of the time, getting them to hold up before they start giving themselves fancy titles and hiring fancy titles. How do you get them to focus it? Because the idea is, how do you prioritize the creation of the product or the iteration of the product versus the idea like, we got to be sales led, but if you're selling the wrong thing, or if your thing is not good enough to be sold, but here you are.
We're talking about titles of the people, not to be the CEO.
Because they get blinded by the idea that they got to puff up like a cobra. Make themselves look bigger than they are. And a lot of the time, what they'll do is they'll attend a thing like this or read a book like this and try to adapt the practices of a company that's 100 times bigger. And probably that's the wrong idea.
I agree with you. And that's why I keep emphasizing with that it's okay to be a problem market fit stage company for a number of years. That's okay. And I think as a CEO, as a leader in the company, you have to just be okay with that and get people to think about it that way. I think the worst thing you could do, and I said that earlier, is you cannot leapfrog it. If you leapfrog it, you will essentially burn yourself. You'll fall down, because that's really why so many companies from 10 million to 50 million actually go into that valley of death, because they try to leapfrog it. You're still going to go through the valley of death. The book and the ideas that we just talked about are literally going to help you navigate that better. That's what this book is about. Cool. Again, thank you everybody for being here. And again, if there are any more questions, we can take it later on. Thank you.
Thank
Appreciate it,
you.
guys.